Hello, HMO community, and welcome to this podcast. We are going to be talking to Giuseppe Leon. Giuseppe started in property in around 2014, I think it was the end of 2014, and he started with an HMO model that required very little investment and has been successful to the point that it enabled Giuseppe to leave his full-time job just a few years later. So I'm really happy that we've got Giuseppe on today. He's going to share a little bit about his model and his journey. And welcome, Giuseppe.
Hi, Graham. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited by today's chat. And yeah.
No worries. Giuseppe, probably a good place to start is the day job and where you were in your career before you got to property, and how you took the step from that into property in the first place.
Yes, so my name is Giuseppe Leon. Clearly, I'm Italian. I come from Milan, and I started my professional career, working for Shell, the oil company. I worked for that company for 17 years. In fact, that's the only company I worked for in all my life before setting up my own business. So I worked in Milan, and then I moved to Hamburg in Germany, and then I moved to London. And in 2014, while I was still working for Shell, I wanted to set up my own business, probably because my dad was an entrepreneur in the past, so probably want to show to myself I can do something similar to him. And since I was a child, I really loved properties. In fact, I went to study architecture when I was a kid. And I decided to study business and economics at the uni, but this passion for floor plans and property has always been in my blood. So in 2014, while I was, as I said, still working for Shell, I started looking for other opportunities, and I started reading, and I bumped into a few courses about properties, and that's where it all started in November 2014. And then I worked part-time for 2.5 years, and then I managed to move full-time in property investment.
Okay, that's great. In fact, I think looking back, we met, didn't we, back at that time at a property event. Tell us a little bit about your model to begin with, because it's very much rent-to-rent focused. I haven't done much rent-to-rent. I've done more buy-to-rent, if you like. But just tell us a little bit about how you started your journey, and go through that a little bit with us, please.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I didn't remember that. We met exactly in that first course I took about rent-to-rent, and that was 2014. So, as I said, when in 2014 I want to start my new business, at that time I didn't have a lot of cash available in my pocket. So I wanted to find a strategy that allowed me to create cash flow, because the goal was to create a business that was giving me a monthly profit equal or more than my corporate salary and my wife's salary and so on. So to be very honest, at that point, I didn't know anything about property. So what I did is I Googled, and something similar like property strategy, which do not require a lot of cash upfront, and rent-to-rent popped up. And at that time, I didn't have a clue what rent meant it was, but as usual, I'm very curious and I'm always open-minded. So I found this course where we met, and so I went to this course for 2 days, and and I came back home 2 days later, and I spoke with my wife Jillian, and said, I think I found the strategy that will allow us to build our business and eventually leave our corporate job. And so I started, as I said, rent-to-rent. A reason for that is because it's a cash flow strategy. And but I gave to this rent-to-rent strategy clear goals. So I had 4 goals to achieve between now and when I'm 8 years old. So the first goal was that I want to replace my salary, the profit of this company. And I'm glad to say, as you mentioned in my nice introduction, that I achieved that goal. So we started in 2014, end of 2014. My wife managed to leave her job in January 2016, because at that point our rent-to-rent business was giving us a profit that was equal our salary. And then in June 2017, I managed to leave my job as well in Shell, because at that point, the company, the rent-to-rent business was giving us a profit equal to my wife and my salary together as a profit. And so that was the first goal, and we ticked that one. Then the goal where we are just about to finish now is I want rent-to-rent, to fuel our life, but also to allow us to build some cash amounts that I could use to purchase my properties, because the long term is to build my own HMO business. And I'm glad to say that I'm working on my last refurb today, as we speak now. It should finish, I think, the 15th of July, roughly. And after that, I will have built my portfolio the size I planned back in 2014. And I did all of that using the BRR strategy, so buy, refurbish, refinance, and rent out, and so that I could recycle my cash and restart again. And then once I achieved that goal, which is, as I said, in a few weeks' time now, technically in 20 days from today, I will start the step number 3, which is basically at that point, my own portfolio will give me enough money, even more than enough money, to live my life. And then I will use the money, the profit from rent-to-rent business to pay down the mortgages on my portfolio, because the end goal is to have a portfolio without any debts. And based on my Excel spreadsheet, that should be achieved by 2031. And when that happens, I will, I can completely retire, get somebody to run my portfolio, and get that famous passive income that we are all looking for and we have not found yet. Yeah.
That's a great story, Giuseppe. And I guess it underlines the importance, doesn't it? Because you've had a very clear vision and you put a plan together in place over a number of years. So you've known where you wanted to get to. How important has it been to you to have that plan in place and work to that plan?
For me, that's the only way, in my opinion, to achieve your goals is to have really detailed plans. I usually have a 3-year plan, and then a 1-year plan, and a weekly plan, and all of them roll back together. And I review my plans on a quarterly basis, and on a monthly basis, I run a profit and loss report of all my properties, comparing the budget, so the plan for the following months that I set up at the beginning of the year, the actual, so what I've achieved actually that month, and then the variance analysis, which is the difference between the budget and what I've achieved really, so that if I'm deviating in a negative way from my goal, I can readjust my course straight away. For me, planning in detail is like, flying with a rudder. If you don't do that, you can fly blind, basically. You might be lucky to achieve your destination, but very likely you're going to crash. So for me, it's really, really important to plan really in detail. And that's probably because I worked for Shell in the finance department for 17 years. And that was my job, planning and, this kind of stuff. So I could not set up a business without this type of level of planning. But more importantly is also check your profitability on a monthly basis, so be on top of your numbers really in an intense way. Because that's the only way really to make sure that you achieve your goals.
Okay, that's excellent and very good advice. Now, one of the things I find intriguing about your story is how you started with very little capital, because I speak to a number of people who are wanting to start an HMO journey, and they say to me, look, Ron, I really want to get involved, but I don't have any money yet, or I've only got a certain amount of money yet, and how much does an HMO cost to buy? And when I run through the numbers with them, they kind of look a little bit disillusioned and, almost to the point that they want to walk away. So for the benefits of the audience, Giuseppe, what is rent to rent and how does it work?
Yeah, so rent to rent means basically you, in a nutshell, in a very simplistic way, you rent a property from a landlord with and you are allowed then to re-rent that property to your tenants room by room. And the difference between the amount of rent you get from your tenants and what you pay to your landlord, net of the operating expenses, that's your margin, okay? And the beauty of that strategy, so that strategy is a control strategy. So you have got the control of the assets and the cash flow that is given by that asset without owning the assets, okay? So the good news is you don't need to spend, as you said, a fairly huge amount of money to purchase an asset, and you can benefit from the cash flow out of that. As a generic ballpark figure, you need roughly £5,000–6,000 as an average to kick off a rent-to-rent deal, and you can make, I would say, between £500 and £700 as a gross margin per month. So can you see, you can recover your investment pretty quickly. The other good thing about rent-to-rent, in my opinion, is that it allows you to gain a lot of experience in managing HMO. So when you are allowed or you can purchase an HMO, when you go to a lender, they will always ask you, have you got any experience in managing HMO? And thanks to the rent-to-rent, I could say straight away after 1 year, say yes, because I've been managing several HMOs in the last few years. So that allowed me to get more easily finance for my HMO. And the last thing I would say is, everybody is saying it's really nice and we all want to manage HMO, but you might find that it's not your cup of tea. So with the rent-to-rent, you have got a fairly small amount of money invested in that HMO, and your contract, usually the first one is 2-3 years long. So if you change your mind and you find out that HMO is not your cup of tea, after 2 or 3 years, you can get out of that market and move on, okay? If you purchase a property, obviously you can sell it, but it becomes a little bit more complicated. You might lose more money if the market at that moment is going down.
Yeah, I think that's a very good synopsis, particularly the getting started bit, because as you say, strictly speaking, technically, a bank will ask for previous property management experience, at least, if not HMO management experience, before they would consider you and lending you any money. So that is it's difficult. It's difficult to get on the go. So yeah, I mean, I've looked at rent-to-rent before. It's a very interesting model, and on paper it seems quite straightforward, doesn't it? But there are challenges to it. So could you talk to us, Giuseppe, a little bit about the challenges involved in setting up and getting going with rent-to-rent?
Yes. So. Technically, it's not a very difficult strategy, but there are challenges, obviously. So the first challenge is at the beginning, when you have never done that, you need to find a way to convince the letting agency or the landlord to give you a chance to run the property as an HMO and on their behalf. And what I always say is, and this is what a lot of people tend not to do, is to sell themselves what they've done so far in their previous professional life. So when I started, if I had gone to the letting agency and said, well, I'm Giuseppe Leon, a property investor, and I would like to rent this property as a company let agreement and so on. And if they ask me, what is your experience? Obviously, I didn't have any experience in managing that. So I would have had fairly small chance to succeed. But what I did is I went there and said, I'm Giuseppe Leon. I've been working for an international company for 17 years. I had a global role. So I was selling myself as a professional and all the skills I had. I was a project manager in finance, so I understand the numbers, I understand the project management and so on. And I've been trained professionally on how to run HMOs. And now I'm a new business. Can you see, in this way, you sound much more convincing. And so this is the first thing, the first challenge everybody will have at the beginning. The second challenge, which is a challenge for everyone who is running HMO, either you own them or you have got a rent-to-rent deal with that, is, find tenants, good tenants, and keep good tenants with you. That's the biggest challenge. This is also probably the biggest fear for somebody who's never been in HMO, because you read a lot of horror stories, but as usual, the horror story is like the top of the iceberg. There are a lot of very good story behind, but you always hear the bad ones. Okay, so the trick is really to scrutinize as much as you can your tenants at the beginning, and try to put together a group of tenants that they've got the same ideally background. So, for example, coming from the same area of the world, for example, the same age, the same work pattern, this kind of thing. So there is less probability that the team, the HMO mates will have problems between each other. And so these are the two main ones. And the third one is obviously managing maintenance. But again, the trick of not getting scared about maintenance is to jump on the maintenance issue straight away, because if you do that, your tenants are really happy because they know that you want to sort out the issues immediately so that they can live in the house nicely without any problem. And B, if you fix that maintenance problem immediately, very likely the cost of fixing it will be lower if you leave that issue, getting worse and worse over the time. So there are only good reason for really sorting out your maintenance issues straight away. If you do that, and if you've got a good power team with you who can do the stuff for you, maintenance should not be as scary as it sounds at the beginning.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice, and something I want to jump onto that you've just discussed, and that is the subject of community. Because when I speak to people about rent to rent, often what I hear back is, oh, what if there's voids? What if our costs are more than our revenue? What if we get difficult tenants? Those sort of things. I'm right in saying, Giuseppe, aren't I, that with a rent-to-rent property, you can't really do it up to the same standard that you would your own property because you don't own it. And therefore, your real selling point is the community of tenants that you have in that property. I was using the analogy, if you go out with a group of friends, what determines whether you have a good night or not is not the venue that you're in, but it's the people you're with. If you're in an amazing restaurant or bar, you're very salubrious and everything else, and you're with people you're not getting on with, you're not going to remember that evening. But if you're with great people, you remember that evening. So it's identical with tenants. And even if you own the HMO versus rent to rent, with both models, it's really, really important not just to let any tenant in willy-nilly, but to really think and focus on that community. And that often means, doesn't it, Giuseppe, that you can walk away from a tenant that might be right for your property, but because you're unsure, they don't fit into the community, you need to walk away and carry on looking.
I fully agree with you, and I love your example you made on the group of friends going the right place. It's exactly that. So there are two things that are really. One is to choose the right house. So I now view a lot of properties, but probably 50% of them, even if financially they would stack up as a rent-to-rent, I'm going to walk away because, as you said correctly, you cannot refurbish the house as if it was yours because you don't own the asset. And so if the house is not in good shape, your tenants will not be happy there, okay? So if the house is not the right one for you, just walk away. It's much better to have no deal than a bad deal, because the bad deal will stay with you for 2-3 years and it will be very painful. And on the tenants, it's exactly the same. We pre-screen tenants even before setting up a viewing. So we ask something like 12 questions on the phone before we even arrange the viewing. And when we do the viewing, we keep asking them. And if the gut feeling is that person is not a good fit for the rent-to-rent for that house because of the other people living there, we say no to that person. And again, I much prefer having an empty room for 1 to 3 weeks than having the wrong tenants in from day one, because they're a bad tenants or a cheeky tenants is going really to take so much of your time and your mental energy. It's the worst that can happen to you. And In my team is just three of us, me, my wife, we've got an employee with us. And we've got a rule that if any of our three think that that person is not the right one for the house, we don't offer the room. So we don't take any risk there. And, I've got a lot of rooms available. And I can say that over the 7 years that I've been in business, I can count the unpleasant tenants on the finger of one hand. I still remember them. That tells you how painful was the experience, okay? But fortunately, because we pre-screen, we do such a good deep due diligence of them, we just minimize the risk to 3 or 4 bad tenants. And, being an entrepreneur is all about minimizing the risk. There is always a risk. If you can minimize it as much as you can, that's the best situation you can be as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you're doing 1 or 2 rent-to-rents, if you do things well, you're probably not going to have any difficult tenants. But as you build up your tenancy communities and you start getting to 20, 30, 40, 50, it's going to happen, isn't it? But it's just a question of minimizing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got 100 plus rooms and, the probability to get somebody is pretty high. But because we pre-screen so much and we use our gut feeling as well, it's, as I said, in 7 years, I had 3 or 4, no more than 4 bad tenants. And I wish I had not had even those 4 because we were painful.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? When it goes wrong, very, very rarely it can go horribly wrong, can't it?
Exactly. Absolutely. Anyway.
But it can be the best way to learn. So the other thing I just want to quickly jump on, Giuseppe, because again, I'm just thinking about rent to rent because it's something I haven't done too much, but I know the theory of it quite a bit because I've had a few conversations. So the other challenging thing can be looking for leads, can't it? And I think what you've just said is that if you just started out, you're at your desk and you spent a week looking for leads, and then suddenly a landlord says, yes, I want to meet you. I'm interested in what you do. There can be a tendency to get excited to go along and meet that individual, but you can't be kind of clouded by enthusiasm to get the deal, can you? You've got to really, really stand back and analyze that deal properly, because as you say, it's better to have no deal than the wrong deal.
Absolutely. So what you need to do is do a really deep due diligence on the area. What we do is we have got a spreadsheet, which is fairly sophisticated to check the Goldman areas, so there where we want to invest. And we put together 6 pieces of data that we gather from various platforms and so on. And just we take decisions, so data driven, not based on my feeling or my emotion or, my mates told me this and that. It's based on data, on facts. And that's the way to minimize, again, the risk to choose the wrong area. And I agree with you, when you meet the lender or when you meet the letting agency, you need to take away any emotion, even if the lender is the nicest person on the planet. But if the house is not the right one for you, you just need to walk away, because otherwise you will suffer. I made a mistake. My first house was probably the worst house you could ever rented. It was, a fairly rundown house with a single glazed window with aluminum framework. Can it be so silly to rent a house like that? Yes, I did it. And I had 6 months of hell because obviously my tenants were very, very annoyed and upset with all of that. Fortunately, the landlord is a very experienced landlord, is a portfolio lender and so on. And we got on very, very well together. So I managed to convince him to replace all the windows with, triple glaze, UPVC frame and so on. And then I managed to keep that house for long. In fact, that is the house that eventually I purchased, and now is the house that I'm refurbishing. So that was my first rent-to-rent, and now I'm refurbishing it. So that's the other thing that is great about rent-to-rent. You can also build your portfolio purchasing your rent-to-rent properties. And that's the beauty of this strategy, that you can use it as a vehicle then to build your own portfolio.
And I guess that makes sense, because a lot of your clients are going to be people who are not necessarily terribly, they might be interested in owning the property, but they're not terribly interested in doing the day-to-day management. And then I guess within that, over time, they might not become terribly interested in keeping the property, or they might want the money for, you know, other reasons. And because they're not committed to the property and feeling the love, they could become minded to sell it. So what you're saying is with that portfolio, you're building up your income, building up your capital, you're also going to be in a position to actually buy those units over time.
Absolutely. This landlord I'm talking about is a big portfolio landlord, and I purchased actually 3 rent-to-rent deal through him. And the reason why he was open to sell it, because we built a really good relationship. So I managed his property for several years, so we became almost friends as well. But more importantly, he wanted now in the last 2-3 years is investing in a completely different strategy in a different place. So I'm in Bristol, but he's investing somewhere else. So he needs capital to be released. So with me, he knows that he can, you know, go through the purchase process very quickly, because there are no, you know, no reason why he should not go through. And we use some solicitors that know how to work together. So the transaction goes through very, very quickly, and he gets a lot of cash. Then now he can invest somewhere else where his passion is about. And so, yeah, building the relationship with the landlord, with the letting agency is the key really to then scale up your business, because you can leverage, you know, the portfolio of the landlord or the, you know, the network of your letting agency to scale up your rent-to-rent business. And that's what I love about that. For me, leveraging other people network or portfolio is the key to scale up very, very quickly. And that's what I've done.
Yeah, that's amazing, Giuseppe, what you've achieved in the time period that you've achieved. For people listening to this podcast, what kind of skill set and attribute do you think is important, or that one needs in order to be successful in property generally, but I suppose more specifically in terms of rent to rent?
So there are. The key one, in my opinion, is if you run your business, you need to understand the numbers. So you need to understand how to read the numbers, how to calculate the profitability, and so on. That's one of the key skills. You need also to be able to convince other people to believe in you. So you need to be a little bit salesperson for yourself, you know. And but the key one is, and that's my motto. If you talk with my 2 kids, that's the first 3 words they learn before saying daddy, mommy, is never give up. Because, you know, we are all here smiling and nice and so on, but it can be pretty brutal sometimes. It's, you know, it's an emotional roller coaster. I'm not trying to say it was plain as hell for 7 years. It was not, obviously. And so there were some days, sometimes it happens even now, where I say, you know, I was working for the biggest corporation in the world, traveling business class, 5-star hotel. Why did I put myself through this one? Okay. But then, you know, 5 minutes later, I think about my end goal that I set 7 years ago, and it all made sense again. So yeah, because I want to achieve that goal, which is important. So I need to go through, you know, a rough time sometimes. So never give up, be resilient is the key to succeed. And this is valid in everything, but in properties and rent-to-rent, especially in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And the other thing is just get started, because you mentioned something earlier. You didn't have any experience. You had no experience of HMOs or property, but you went out and started talking to those customers anyway, or clients, because a lot of people that I come about, they're perpetual researchers. They're always in research mode. They don't feel they know enough. So they're learning. And bless them, it's nothing critical, but often you find they're just not taking action. And really, they've just got to say, hey, I know where I want to get. I don't quite know how I'm going to get there, but let me just give it a go and get started. And often all those premonitions people have are immediately dispelled when they start, because they're making assumptions about things that don't, you know, necessarily exist. For example, with rent to rent, a landlord doesn't necessarily need you to have any experience of doing it previously if he believes in you or if she believes in you and if they buy into you. So yeah, no, I get that. Just Giuseppe, where you've done a lot and you had your objectives in terms of where you wanted to get to. How has it changed your life? And have you achieved what you wanted to achieve in that regard?
Yeah, it massively changed my life, because the key reason, my real why I want to go into properties is, and I genuinely said that, it's not because I want to have, a Porsche parked in my driveway. Obviously, if I get it, I'm not going to cry, but that's not really my drive. My real reason is to live my life, work life in a flexible way. So I want to have the same amount of holidays as my kids. So when the school is closed, I want to be able to go on holiday with them, because our family passion is traveling. Okay, obviously in the last 18 months that was a little bit reduced, but we are starting traveling again. So for me, it's really the opportunity to spend more time with family and friends and work from wherever I want and need. I can run my business through this one here because I've automated all my processes and so on. So there were times where, I was skiing on my Italian Alps, and I can still keep an eye on. Okay. And that's really what I love it. I don't want to be stuck in my office here from 9 to 5 every single day. It's more working when and from where I want, because I want to spend more time with my family and friends. And I've achieved that, to be honest. And as I said, in 20, I will have built the business as I wanted. Technically, I can retire after that. I will not. Technically, financially, I'm independent. And I'm the proof example that, I'm not a genius. I've got a fairly silly accent, and I made it happen, which means that everybody can make it happen. You just need to be driven, educate yourself, and resilience. As I said, never give up, and it will happen. And have a very strong and detailed plan that you monitor and check on a regular basis. These are really the key ingredients to succeed, and I did.
Yeah, I think that's great, because we all hear the term financial freedom, but what does that actually mean? People think that financial freedom means that you can earn money without having to do anything, and that frankly doesn't exist. But what financial freedom can mean, and I think our interpretation is the same, is it's the ability to plan your work around your life rather than your life around your work. So, and that's the key difference, isn't it? And having that freedom to do so.
Absolutely, that's the really quality of life, in my opinion, when you can plan your life, your work around your life. That's exactly what it is about. And I love my job, but I don't want to spend every single time there. I much prefer, like a couple of days ago, I took half a day off and I went surfing with my son. Excellent. I could do that. I can achieve that, and that's what it is all about, in my opinion. And
yeah, and you can do it impulsively as well, can't you? Pretty much.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I did. It was beautiful weather, and say, I'm off. And we went.
So Giuseppe, that's great. So you started off in rent to rent, and you're now acquiring your own HMOs, which you and your wife are owning and operating. What are your plans going forward? What are your plans for the future?
Yeah, so my plan is, now that we have built our portfolio, this as we want, I'm going to keep it as it is, unless a special opportunity arises. Obviously, we will keep the rent-to-rent business as it is, because we want to use that money to pay down, as I said earlier, the mortgages on my portfolio. And what I want to do now is I don't know if you guys know about that. I'm also mentoring on rent-to-rent. So we like to really make the mentoring bigger, because that's really my passion, where I can see, the reason why I do it, as I've said before, I don't need the money for that, because I've got a pretty big business. It's just my passion of helping people to change their life. And so it's like giving back to the community, and then traveling as much as I can, because now, hopefully, in the next few weeks or months, probably, we will be able to travel again. And I seriously miss traveling. So I will just go around the world with my kids, because it's, at the end of the day, the kids, ourselves as a family, you remember, it's all about memories. It's not about, physical stuff. The memories is what counts in the life. When you go to an amazing holiday, you do a safari, stuff like that, they will remember for the rest of their life. And that's what it is about. So
yeah, no, completely. I'm interested to talk to you a little bit about your mentorship program, because we've discussed this before briefly, and from what I understand, it's quite a personal approach you take with your mentees. So just step me through what you offer and how you work with the mentees that you take on board in helping them achieve their objectives.
yeah, so I take it very personal because I want to give 150%. My goal is that at the end of my mentoring, my students are independent and they can walk. So I teach them how to fish. I don't give them the fish, if you know what I mean. And so we've got a program of 12 weeks, and we meet on a weekly basis, like we're doing here. And we go through all the end-to-end process. So from module 1, how to set up a business, to the last module, which is scaling up. So put in place, automation system in place, procedure that you can give to the people you outsource or delegate your activities to, and so on and so forth. And but the key part of my mentoring, I think, is the accountability bit. So every week, my students need to agree with me some goals for the following 7 days, sorry, and then we will check back on those goals 7 days later. So that's what I think, that accountability so strict. So on a weekly basis, we kind of force people to do at least one activity per week, and which allow them, to move forward much more quickly. They had not had that accountability. So, and as usual, I share all my experience, all my tools, everything, and I tell them the truth when something is bad and so on. I said that, so I don't sugarcoat the tablets. I don't know what you say in English, but that's the main. So the pure truth straight away, even if it's a bad news. That's the right way to do it. And the goal of a mentor, the mentor has done I made a lot of mistakes, and the goal is to make sure that your students don't make the same mistakes. So you reduce the amount of mistakes that student can have, and so that he will get to the goal more quickly, more safely, and wasting less money in mistakes.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of value in that, because people can do these things on their own without mentorship, but the cost of that is the mistakes that are made on the way, and the opportunity cost of having to learn how to do it when that time could be used actually doing it. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But there's a lot of training courses and mentorships which are kind of mass market, aren't they, with classrooms of people, and it's not very individualized. So yeah, no, I think it's great that you've got that personal focus. Do you just operate, do you offer the service just locally or further afield to Bristol?
Everywhere in England. And because, as I said, thanks to Zoom, we don't need even to travel. So it's really simple that. And we offer either one-to-one or a very small group. So my groups are 3 or 4 people maximum, because as I said, I want to give 150%. If you are in a group of, 100 people, there is nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing anybody doing that, but I personally prefer giving a personal touch there. And, it's just a small family, 3 or 4 people, or even better, one-to-one, and they can really pick my brains under 50%.
Okay, that's great, Giuseppe. It's been amazing having you here on this podcast. If anybody wishes to get hold of you just to talk about property in general, or just to chew the fat, or ask you about rent to rent, what's the best way of getting hold of you?
I would say the best way is to find me on Facebook, on Giuseppe Leon, on my profile, and send me a message through that one. And I live on Facebook, so that's the quickest way. Otherwise, they can send me an email, and these are the best way to contact me. Or they can find me on Instagram at Giuseppe Leon, Rent to Rent Expert. These are the quickest way to do it.
Okay, well, that's great, Giuseppe. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed that, and hopefully people will find it interesting and inspiring. That's the most important one. Thank you very much.
No worries. It's been great to have you. And for anybody who wants to get in contact with Giuseppe, we'll drop Giuseppe's contact details in. And for more content on HMOs, do go to our YouTube channel, HMO Matters, or head to our website, hmomatters.co.uk. Thank you for tuning in.